recording feature on.
Welcome, Dallas educators. My name is Beth Kleinman, and today on the SchoolNet training site, I'm going to show you how to access assessment results in the Classrooms module of SchoolNet. During this webinar, I will be presenting the content from a high level via the PowerPoint, and then I will go live on the Dallas training site. At any time, you can pause the recording and try activities out on your own. You can restart the recording when you are ready to move on. So my goals for you today are for you to understand the student information that is available to teachers and then to examine various classroom reports to analyze student performance on assessment. At any time, you can access helpful resources from different areas within the tool. You can access it from PD Planner, where we have lots of quick reference cards, as well as some end-user PowerPoints. Also, throughout the whole tool, you'll see a little orange question mark, a little round circle with a question mark in it, and it's contextualized for the area that you are in the tool. So you'll be able to access help from there. And then at the bottom of any screen, if you are interested in knowing different hardware or software requirements, those can be accessed at the footer of any page when you're in the tool. So from the first session, and this is part 3 of the 3-part series, but from the first session, you learned how to create items and create tests. And then in the second session, we learned how to schedule, administer, and then score those assessments. So what today's webinar is focused on are how do you get those results that we created in the assessment admin module. So just a quick reminder, what is assessment admin? It is the area where you can build tests and monitor the collection of results. And then any of those results, depending on the category of test you create, you can view the reports on the or student responses in either the Classrooms module or the School and District Data module. So here's the overview. Again, this is a reminder, but the first step when it comes to testing administration, which is really the heaviest lift, is you're going to create items and create tests. And this is what we went over in part 1 of the assessment admin series. And then in part 2, we talked about printing answer sheets, booklets, and then we briefly talked about student usernames. At this point, I want to reiterate, and we didn't say it in the first few sessions, but since in Dallas you all use the Active Directory login, that's how your students are going to log in as well. So it's really not necessary to print out the usernames because nothing will show, because again, students will log in using their own credentials. And then once you've scheduled it, and then you're going to administer the test to the student. And we went through that in part 2. And then once you've administered them, whether you've administered it online or you did it on paper, you may have to scan in those results. But depending on whichever medium you used, we're going to focus today on 5, on how do you analyze the performance data. So if you actually scan in the results or even collect them online, you will be able to see the student results and data in real time. So let's talk about classroom level reporting. As I mentioned, there are actually 2 different modules where you can get reporting. There's the School and District Data module or the Classroom module. We're going to focus on Classroom, but the administrators can actually look in the School and District Data module when there are district or school benchmarks being administered. We're going to focus on any common classroom, or even school level reporting today. So the first place to start is on the home page. As soon as you log in, a teacher will select their section, and then depending on what section they choose and any data that would correlate if you've administered any tests, what will show below that are any results for that current group of students. So in this screenshot, you'll see that I chose my science section right here, and then I can see that there are some English tests that correlate to when we say district and local tests. That means it's a school or district benchmark. The classroom test will be any classroom test that I administered to this particular section. And then we'll talk a little bit about the standardized test tab. But what you're going to see is kind of a nice graphic representation of how my students did. And if it's a district or school test, there'll be some comparative performance graphs or color charts. I'll have links to some additional reports, and then I'll also be able to see my individual student list with their score and their score group. So this is always a good time to look at our students that we have assigned to our sections. So as we scroll down a little bit in this area, and when I go live, I will actually access this, I can see what information is available about each student. So the data that we are pulling in per student is what I like to call the bottom level. So if we do not have student information or student data, we can't build reports. So when we bring up a student profile, these tabs will be the same for all the students in the district. We'll be able to see the student overview, which will give me kind of the general information, their current enrollment. I'll also be able to track their absences and their tardies. And then I can also see what their enrollment or their schedule is as well for the current year. And then as we work through our tabs here, again, this is a screenshot, so it might not be in the same order as we'll see on the training site. But I can access standardized test information. I'll be able to access prior years and go back as far as we've been pulling the data in. And it will be the previous year's standardized test information. The enrollment and academic record is where I can see the current students' enrollment as well as their grades or schedules. And it will go back as long as the student has been, as long as we've had the system, which is going back several years. Programs is where you may see any programs that the student would be enrolled in. That might be special ed, gifted and talented. It'll show their feeder pattern, and so on. Disciplinary incidents, if you are permission to see them, you will see any disciplinary incidences and what the consequences were. Now we're going to spend most of our time in these two tabs, which is the benchmark test and the classroom test tab. This will list all tests this student took regardless of what subject I teach for that student. So if I'm a math teacher, I can see how the student did on their language arts, social studies, science, and etc. The difference between the two tabs is the benchmark test would be considered a school or a district benchmark, and the classroom test is going to be considered any classroom, just a test that was given at the classroom level, and it was only to my section of students. But again, I'll be able to see any subjects that the student, any classroom test that the student took regardless of the subject, because I am a teacher of this student, so I can see his or her data. So at this point, I'm going to go live on my training site. I'm going to access my SchoolNet homepage, just give you a brief description of it, and then I'm going to drill into a student profile. Now we are focusing our login today as a teacher. This webinar is geared towards a teacher. So once I log in, it's going to tell you at the top that I am a teacher right here. And now I get to choose which section that I teach that I want to look at. I'm going to click on the drop down and I'm going to choose my math section. I can scroll down a little bit and then I can see from this tab that I've given, now again this is my training site, but given several district or school benchmarks, and I can see the dates that they were administered, I can see their scores, and then I can see their the score group, the color coding. And scroll down a little bit, and I'll be able to see different assessments, so I can click on this drop down and choose a different assessment, and I can see how many questions were on the test, how many students submitted it, what was my average total score, and then if it was a district and local test here, I can see any comparison charts. When we start looking at other assessments like the classroom test, it won't show a comparison chart. Now these will be links to additional reports, so I can click on any of those, and we're not going to drill into those yet. But I want to scroll down a little bit and point out and this area we call the Classroom Assessment Monitor. But I like to do a comparison here. So I can see how each of my students did, what their total score was, or percent correct was, what their score group was. And as we start progressing through the school year, in the same subject area, it's going to start to list all the tests that the student took in this subject area. So since this is math, I'm able to see that this student has taken 2, this one has taken 3, and you can see if they've improved or if they were, falling behind. Anytime you see a blue link, it's going to take you to the student profile. So at any time when I want to view a student profile, I can just click on the student. You also will see that there's a search box up at the top if you're working with an administrator, they'll have the ability to search for a student. But as a teacher, we're able to see all of the students enrolled to each of our sections. So I'm going to go through the tabs. The student overview, as I mentioned, lists personal information as well as the current enrollment, and I can see their absences and tardies. I can click on that number, and it's going to tell me the date and the event type, and the same thing with the tardies. I'll click on the number. It'll give me the date and event type. X that out. I can scroll down, and I can see what the student's current academic record is. So I'm able to see all the different courses he or she takes, and then I can see what their grades are as the year progresses. Scroll to the bottom now. And what you'll start to see is any district assessments that have been administered, you will be able to see performance for their weak standards and strong standards. So it'll show all the different tests that have been administered. So I can see there's an ELA, reading, life and physical science, as well as social studies. So I can see kind of from a high level how my student is doing, how this particular student is doing or did on the most recent benchmark from the district level. All of these show me the percent correct by that standard, and then the top will give me the overall performance and the score group. Keep in mind that I will be able to click on details here, and it's going to take me to the benchmark tab of the profile right here. So I will jump to that after we go over standardized tests. When I click on standardized tests, it's going to take me to, it's going to list any and all standardized tests that the student has taken. There's 2 different ways I can view it. I can view the section that the student took, and I'm able to see the score group, the test version, and whether or not they met satisfactory. I can click on the details here, and now it's going to break it down to any details that is being reported from the state. So I can see in their math and reading any breakdowns that would be available. Again, it's how the data is reported from the state. I can click back on standardized tests and just go back to kind of the overview. Now, one thing I like to show here is I can click on the distribution chart. When I click on this distribution chart, it's actually going to show me kind of the breakdown of how all the students, now if you look at the student set, it has 230. And the first thing that teachers will think is, I didn't teach 230, but it's basically comparing the student results to where the student took the test with all the other students. So this student may not necessarily have been at my school last year, but this helps me to see where he or she kind of fell with the rest of the students that he took the test with. So as I can see, Jose is in the Arguello School for grade 7, but if I jump into my enrollment and academic records, and I know I'm jumping between tabs, but I can see that this student was in the Arguello School for 6th grade. So I have the ability to see and all the historical information as long as we have it. And as I said, we have several years we go back. So I can see where they were, and I can also see all of their academic records, so I can expand it, so I can see this student for the last 3 years. So because he was in the Arguello School, his standardized test information is compared to 230 students at the Arguello School in 6th grade. So again, from that distribution chart, this is looking at the STAR test for 6th grade for 230 students, not just your group of students you teach. So let's talk about the benchmark test tab. The benchmark test tab is going to list, as I said, any and all subjects. Now, if I'm just a math teacher, I could just, change the test category. I can sort it by prior years. I can just scroll down into the math section. In this area, I can't just look at math. I get to see all the subjects. So if I'm interested in knowing how this particular student did on an assessment, I can just click right on the test itself, and then I get to see every single item, the standard it was mapped to, what the correct answer was, and what the student's response was. If I have the answer, if I have the item content, I can view the item by clicking on View. But if it was an answer key only, and we'll see when this loads, which this is, we won't see the item content. We'll just see what the correct response was, and then we'll see what the student response is. Now notice down below I get this distribution field. Now this will show for our district and school benchmarks, and it's a great reporting tool because it's going to help me see that in this particular item, the correct response was D, but only 28% of the students got it correct. And then they tell me the most common incorrect response. And over, almost 36% of the students that got it incorrect answered B. But it also shows me the distribution of what percentage of the students answered the other choices. But it really helps me to maybe, if I had the paper copy of the assessment, to know why a majority of the students answered B. Classroom test is going to give you kind of the same information. Again, you can click on any assessment. So I just click on the test name here. I can view the standards it's mapped, the correct response, the incorrect response, and actually look at the item content. And this is an example that we do have the item content, so it shows me that the correct response was A, my student answered B, but notice that I do not have a distribution chart here. The reason the distribution chart doesn't show is because it's a classroom test. It's based on just your classroom. And we're able to get this data in a different format when we go into the classroom module. So in either tab that I pick, benchmark test or classroom test, I can show my test by standard. So again, it breaks it down by subject. It's going to end up being a long list. So I can truly see from my student, from this particular student, how he or she did on each standard for the different assessments. So you'll be able to see when it was last assessed. This standard could have been assessed multiple times. and then it'll tell you their score and their score group, similar to the test. So with the test, it's just all the standards, or by showing it by standard, you get to see each standard. And you can do the same classroom test. Disciplinary incidences, as I said, if you're permission to see it, you'll see any incidences that show. Enrollment and academic record, I already spoke about, in the sense that you can see where the student was enrolled currently and historically. Programs is a tab that will show whether the student is enrolled in special ed, gifted and talented, those sort of things. And it'll also show the feeder pattern. And then if you have, at your school, implemented the interventions module, and the student has interventions, you will see on the interventions tab whether or not they have any plans assigned to them. So you can choose a school year, and then it will list the plans, and you will have the ability to view the plan. Now be aware, you can only view the students that are currently in your classroom. Now at any point, you can create a nice PDF, and when I click on this, I'm going to be given the option to choose which of those tabs, of all the tabs that I showed you, so maybe I want to see classroom data and standardized test data. You don't have to print the whole thing, so if I just click 2 tabs and scroll down, I can create a nice PDF, and then I will be able to have that maybe put in a Hume folder or have it available for when maybe the parent wants to come in and talk about their particular student. So there I can see my current academic record, and now I get to see all their benchmark information. So at this point, I'm going to allow you to, if you'd like, to pause the recording and have you explore through the My SchoolNet page, really just choosing a section and looking at the information here, and then access a student profile by clicking on a student name. At any time when you're ready to return to the recording, you can just continue. Hopefully you've had some time to explore through the My SchoolNet homepage, or as we call Classroom Assessment Monitor, and access a student profile. At this point, I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint and kind of talk about the different types of reports we can access. So one of the fastest ways, as I mentioned, is to click on the reports right from the Classroom Assessment Monitor. Or you can just go to Classroom and select Benchmark Dashboard or Classroom Test Dashboard. Either tab is going to list all of the assessments that this section I chose up above here have taken, regardless of the subject. When you look at it from the home page, it is geared towards that particular subject. When you look at any of these assessments, you can expand the little caret right here, and then you'll kind of get an overview of how your group of students did on a particular strand, and then it'll show you the subgroups and so on. So one of the reports that we like to look at is what we call our standards mastery. This report will allow me to show groupings by standard so I can see the number of students that fell into each score group. Anytime I see a number, I can click on that number and see the list of students that fell into that score group. Now, I don't see the actual student score. I just know that in this example, 8 students were not proficient on this particular standard. Now, some of the other things you'll see on this page is I'll see the number of test items that were on the assessment right here. It'll tell me how many times this particular standard has been assessed. So I may have assessed this on prior tests, but I only had 3 items on the test I chose. Now you'll see a little kind of calendar icon and an M icon. What these refer to are other areas of the classroom module, which allows you to look at any instructional materials that are affiliated with this standard, or you can actually schedule this standard in the planner. We will not be going over these two areas in this webinar as we're just focused on reporting, but if you are interested in finding out about them, you can access the training materials in the PD Planner area. So as I said, anytime you see a number, you can click on this number, and then you're going to be brought to what we call our student mastery grouping. It's going to list the students and how many of them fell into each of the score groups. And then anytime, again, as I see a student name, I can click on that student name and access their student profile. Also from here, if I wanted to, I could create a PDF. And if I had a resource coming in, that resource could help me do some differentiated instruction, small groups, and so on. So from the PowerPoint, I'm going to show you all the different reports, but when I go live on the training site, I'm going to break it into kind of smaller chunks. So another report we like to show is what we call our item analysis. This is one of my favorite reports. This actually takes every single item on the assessment and shows me what the student, each individual student responded. So depending on what assessment I chose, I get to see kind of the overall percent correct by item, the standard it's aligned to, what the correct response is, and then from this screen, I can see each individual, kind of lower down on the screen, should I say, you can see each student's name, what their total score was, and then what each of their responses were for each of the items. If it's an open response item, I get to see a little piece of paper, and I'll be able to see what the student entered. If it's red, it means it's incorrect. If it's green, it means it's correct. At any point, I do have the ability to print as well. So I can print student profiles. I showed you how to PDF it from an individual student. When I go on the demo site, I'll show you how you can print out all of your student profiles at once. You can do a whole class. You can print out a single report, or you can print out reports for each section of a course. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go live on the training site, and I'm going to show you how to access the Standards Mastery Report first. So from the home page that I'm on, I could feasibly click on this right here, but I'm going to show you a different way. I'm going to hover over Classroom, and I'm going to go to Student Performance. From Student Performance, I'm going to be able to access those courses similar to what I saw on the home page, and then I'm going to choose my Math section. And now I'm brought to all the different assessments that these students in this section have taken. So I'm on my benchmark dashboard, or I could click on the classroom test dashboard. On the classroom test dashboard, I can see that I've administered one assessment, but I'm going to be able to get the same information depending, whichever tab I choose. So I'm going to filter it since I'm a math teacher. As you can see, I have language arts, science, social studies, and right now I'm really just focused on my math assessment. One of the other things too is you can click on the bottom here, and when I say show fewer tests, that will only show you the tests that correlate to the section. So since I'm on the training site, I can click on my reading language arts, and that section doesn't have any results. So if you switch your section, then you have the ability to you have the ability to see what assessments are for each of the sections. So if I go back to my math section here, I can see all the different tests. So I can click on show more tests, and it's going to list all the different subject areas that this section of students took. So I'm going to just look at my first math test here. So when I click on the little down arrow, I have the ability to see kind of overall by standard how my students did. And since this only has kind of a high-level standard and it's a district or school benchmark, I can see how my section did as compared to the school, to the feeder, and to the whole district. So as I mentioned, I could quickly click on any of these reports and it will take me to it. Or I could scroll down a little bit and maybe look at different assessments. Again, click on the down arrow. This one has a little bit more standards to look at, but I only have one student result, so it might not give me a lot of information. Let's go back up to this assessment here, and I want to click on Standards Mastery. Oops, sorry. So when I click on this Standards Mastery, it's going to jump me into one of these tabs here. So I could feasibly click right on to Standards Mastery, but keep in mind if I do that, I'm going to have to select all of these choices. What's nice about doing it from the benchmark dashboard is it automatically auto-fills in all the categories for that test I'm looking at. So as I can see, that test I chose is right here, or I could switch the test name. And it's going to show me the number of students that were unsatisfactory or basically fell into all the score groups all the way to excellent on this particular standard. If I click on that number, it's then going to show me the students and their score group. And again, as I showed you earlier, anytime you see a student name, you can view the student profile. You can create a PDF for this actual document right here, or we can go back to previous page and look and see which students fell into this particular standards category. Again, click on the 4, see who those students are, and so on. Then I can go back to previous page. I also have the ability to export. So when I click on export here, I have the option to batch create or create PDF. What batch create will allow me to do is it's going to create reports for all, it's going to print out basically PDF for all the different assessments that are listed here. So I'll have the ability to get 3 different standards mastery reports. If I just create one single, which is just create PDF, it's just going to give me one mastery, and it's going to show me just a nice printout of that report that we were looking at. So at this point, I'm going to show you another way that you can access the Standards Mastery Report. So I'm going to click on the My SchoolNet, and I'm going to choose my section, and here's my district and school test, or let's click on the classroom test here. I have my classroom test here, and I have the option to access the reports from here. When I click on Standards Mastery, it's jumping me over to the classroom student performance Standards Mastery area for that particular assessment. So I've shown you 2 ways. You can access it by choosing your section, going to the benchmark dashboard, expanding a test, and then clicking on the Standards Mastery, or the fastest way is getting it from your home page and clicking on the link to report. And again, since even this is a different assessment, the classroom test shows me the standards, the number of students that fell into each of the score groups, and so on. The last thing I want to look at is the View the Table key, and this is going to show you the score group cutoff. So if any of you were listened to part 2 of our webinar series, we talked about actually changing those score groups if you wanted to, but these are the score groups and the system cut scores by default. So at this point, you are welcome to pause the recording and try to access a standards mastery report on your own, and when you're ready to return, just restart the recording. So hopefully you've had a chance to look at the standards mastery, and now I'm going to go into the item analysis. So because I've already chosen a particular assessment here, I could feasibly just click right on item analysis, and it's going to keep all the settings. So it's going to know I want to look at that same test. So when I go to the item analysis, I have a variety of ways in which I can view the information. I can view it by item number, by standards performance, or percent correct. I can highlight my low-performing students, and if there's a lot more students that took the assessment, it would show everyone. Uncheck that. Now I can see all the different items that are on the assessment. I can click on this caret right here, but keep in mind, because this is a classroom test, this is not going to show any data because it's not going to compare it to the rest of the school or district. When we go into our benchmark test, which I'll switch it to, you'll be able to do some comparative results there. So now what this is going to show me is all my students that took the assessment, what their total score is, and then what their responses were. If it's correct, it's green. If it's incorrect, it'll show up in red. Now, in this example, we did have an open response, so there's a piece of paper here. So I have the ability to click on this piece of paper, and I can see what the student's response was. Now, if I'm not sure what the item itself was, I can access that from the item number at the top. When I click on the item number, I can see what the question content is, and then I can go back and see what the student results were. I can sort by clicking on the column headers. I can sort by their total score if I like. And now let's look and see about changing this to a benchmark test. And it still keeps math 7th. And now I'm looking at this post-assessment, and I can see that I have a lot more results. I'm going to expand it here, and now I can see how my students did as compared to the region and the district. And it looks to me like this is the only school or section that took this assessment. But at a district level, again, this is my training site, so these numbers would change. So we can, click on total score, click on it again to do a reverse sort, and again, green means correct, red means incorrect. And what's a nice thing I like to look at is on this particular item here, as you can see that half of my students got it right and the other half got it incorrect. And look at that. I can see that most of, all of the students that got it incorrect answered G, so that's a good indicator to click on the item number, find out what the question is, and maybe I can figure out why my students answered G based on the question content. So it gives me a great indicator here. So this shows you that 100% of the students that got it incorrect answered H or G or F, whatever the correct or incorrect response is. So let's change the way we view things. So if I say order by standards, this is by default by item number. Now when I do it by standard, it's going to group the items by standard. So I can see, based on this percentage here, if the students are doing well on this particular standard, or if we need to move on to another standard or reteach things. I can also look at order it by percent correct. So I can then put it in order from lowest to highest, and these are the items that I would want to focus on. Last thing is exporting. When it comes to the analysis spreadsheet, this is, when it comes to the item analysis, I can export it to a spreadsheet. So when I click on Export to Spreadsheet, it's going to open it up in Excel, and at that point I have the ability to maybe create some formatting, so on in it. So I can take this graph, take these percentages, depending on what version of Excel I have, I can create charts, tables, and so on. Once I'm in Excel, I can also print it out and take the student off if I wish. So I'm going to show you the quick way. So the way we went to it was we went to Classroom, Student Performance, and I was already in Standards Mastery, but I can click on the My SchoolNet, choose my section, go from my District tab or my Classroom Test tab, choose my test here, and then click on Item Analysis here. And now it's going to take me straight to that assessment. That's really the fastest way, or I can click on this dashboard and access it by clicking the arrow, and you'll see my links to the report here. So at this time, you're welcome to pause the recording and access your own site and view your item analysis report. And when you're ready to continue, you can just return to this recording. So the last report I want to show you is the skills analysis. That report basically combines the item analysis with the standards mastery. So when I click on skills analysis, it's going to take the assessment I was looking at, and it tells me right here what that assessment is, or I could feasibly choose the test here and select this assessment here. So I'll scroll down, and now I'm able to see each student and how he or she did by the skill level. Now you'll see links depending on if the assessment had a subsection or sub-skill. So if I click on the subsection, I can see this is kind of the overarching standard. I hover over it, can tell me what that standard is, and then I can view it at the subsection. If there's even a lower skill level, I can click on the view at all skill level, and it'll basically go down to the lowest level of which the test items were aligned. So as you can see here, based on all my students, I can see for this particular standard 7.5710B, there were total point value of 5, and this student only got 1 of the 5 correct. So this report basically takes the standards mastery and the item analysis and puts it in a report form. So you have the ability to view it by the sub-skill level or the subsection, and I can then click on these to go back up to the top level. If I want to export this, my only option here is to either create a PDF or batch create, which will then print out all of the courses and sections that took all of this assessment. So at this point, you're welcome to pause the recording and practice accessing the skills analysis. And when you're ready to return, you can just restart the recording. So hopefully you've had a chance to look at the item analysis, skills analysis, and standards mastery for either a benchmark test or a classroom test. At this point, I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint and show you just a couple more reports and things we can do within the Classrooms module. So another report that we have is called the Trends Report. This report allows you to compare up to 6 different assessments in the same subject area that you have given to your section of students. And it really helps to show you which standards are the most difficult over time especially, and also to see whether or not your class is improving. And then we have an area where you can go in and actually create what we call student groups based on their assessment results or other criteria. And then if the school or district, if your school has kind of published some reports for you to access, you'll have the ability to run additional reports. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how to do a trends report and then how to group your students and basically run an analysis spreadsheet. And I'll also show you how you can access your standardized test information as well. So I'm going to click on my SchoolNet or my home page, choose my section, and we've kind of been focused on our district and local tests as well as the classroom tests. But notice when I click on my standardized test, from here I can choose whatever standardized test is going to show up here depending on my section, and then I can see the percentages of students that fell into each of the score groups. So because I'm just on the training site, I only really have one student that has results, but it's basically giving me kind of the same look and feel that I got from this district benchmark or classroom benchmark. You'll also see that I have a link to what we call our standards mastery report. So most standardized tests are only going to show you the standards mastery breakdown. So as you can see, I jumped into classroom student performance, standards mastery, and now my standardized test kind of type is selected. But because I have very little results, nothing is showing here. But on your site, depending on the data, you'll be able to see that. So let's talk about trends. So as I mentioned, when I select trends, I have to choose the subject and grade range. Now, I do have the ability to change my category, so I could just look at school or district benchmarks or my classroom, or I can do all, which is actually really nice because I may have some district benchmarks and then I might be doing some classroom benchmarks or classroom tests. So I'm going to choose my pre-assessment, and then I'm going to choose my post-assessment, and then maybe I'll select my open response. Now, ideally, we did test the same standards on these assessments, and you'll be able to see how that looks. Now, you can show up to 6 assessments, and I'm going to choose Go. And now what it's going to show me is the comparison by standard of how my students did from one test to the other. So I can see on all 3 assessments, this standard was included, and I can see that my students were 14% correct, and it's color-coded, meaning that they are still in the red, that they're in the not satisfactory score group. But we are progressing through each standard, we are progressing from one test to the other. And now I'm going to go ahead and click on the standard and see if it drills down to the sub-skill level. And I'm able to drill down to a sub-skill level, and if I click on it another time, I'm actually at the lowest skill level. So ideally, I want to see these scores increasing and obviously the color turning from red to yellow to green. Now I can go back and click on this standard and see if there's any other sub-skills. So it really helps me to determine overall how my students are progressing from one assessment to the other. And if I have in kind of the middle of the sub-skill level at any point, I can click on this arrow and I can go up to the higher level. Now at this example, you can see that all three tests did look at this standard, but my last test added in these additional standards. So if I click on these standards, if I have a lower skill level, it would show up. If it shows up blank, it means that the items were aligned to that upper skill level. So you can compare up to 6 tests. You can also export this, and this is the batch create or the create PDF. So at this point, if you'd like to pause the recording and look into the trends option, again, you can hover over classroom, student performance, find an assessment, or you can click on standards mastery, change the test type to trends, and you'll want to select at least 2 tests to start, and if you have more, you can select those here. So anytime you click on the drop-down, you can add any assessments that will appear here, and then you'll just say go. And it will compare the standards over time if the standards were on multiple assessments. So those additional tests, that additional test that I added doesn't have any comparison results. So again, when you're ready to rejoin the recording, you can just restart. So let's go to our student list and student analysis tab. So from my student performance area, I can click on student list, and from here I can see my section and all the students that are in this section. I also have the ability to access student marks or benchmark results. So when I click on benchmark results, it's going to show me the last three assessments that were given, and I can see the students' overall scores. At any point, I can click on the student name to get to the student profile. This tab right here will take me to student analysis, which will allow me to create additional columns of data to view. Now, what can I print from here? When I go to export, I'm given my batch create option. Now, in the very beginning of the webinar, I showed how you can print a single student profile. When you batch create from the student list, it's going to print all of the student profiles in your section. So if you teach, more than 25 students or 30 students, you can print them all out at the same time. So when I say batch create from the student list, I select my data to print, and from here, this is where I can choose which tab of the student profile I want to include for my printout. So the last area is our student analysis. In the student analysis, this is going to allow me to create my own report if I like, or if my school has published certain reports, they will show here. Now, I know some schools throughout the district have done this, but you may not see anything. If you do not see anything here, then you're going to see a link, create your report, down here. So if you want to create your own report, you can click on create your own report, and you have the ability to add additional points of data. So if you want to see a benchmark test, which we've already seen in here, but you can add it by the subject and the grade range. And I always like to tell people, just because there's a drop-down doesn't mean you have to select it. I usually choose my subject, and maybe I'll choose my administration, but I'll mostly kind of switch between topics or administration or score type. So if I want to know percent correct, I'm going to add my column here, and then it starts to pile up on the left side, and then I can go to my spreadsheet to actually see what type of report it generated. So I can see all my students, and they're percent correct on the most recent math benchmark. But as you can see, a lot of this data I was able to get from either my student list when I looked at benchmark results, or in my standards mastery, skills analysis, or item analysis. So a lot of what we went over today, you'll have the ability to go back to this recording if you'd like. Also, you can go into educator development and do a PD search. And you could search, you can shorten the search and maybe say classrooms. And now you're able to see all the different materials that are available for the classrooms module. These are little PDFs or quick reference cards. There's one for the item analysis, skills analysis. We also have materials about, we also have resources about the instructional materials portion. So that will help you with all kind of the step-by-step. You can also go to the home page and quickly click right here, and it's going to take you to that same location that I went to from Educator Development PD Search. So I want to thank you all for your time, and I hope that you will found this webinar meaningful. This is the last webinar in the series, so thank you again, and just know that all the recordings for Part 1 and through Part 3 will be and are available in PD Planner. Thanks again, and I hope to see you at another webinar.